What secret could possibly hide behind a $5 breakfast order? For 3 years, Emma Clark poured coffee for the same elderly man every single morning. Same booth, same meal, same silence. She had no idea she was being tested. She had no idea that her small acts of kindness were being recorded in a leather journal. And she certainly had no idea that 8 lawyers would one day walk through the diner doors carrying an envelope that would change everything. Emma was 28 years old, but her hands told a different story. They were the hands of someone who'd worked too hard for too long. Calluses from carrying heavy trays, burns from hot plates, cuts from rushed prep work in the kitchen. She worked the morning shift at Maple Street Diner in Portland, Oregon, then ran across town for the evening shift at a nursing home. 2 jobs, 16-hour days, 7 days a week. The math was simple and brutal. Her father's heart surgery 2 years ago had cost $47,000. Insurance covered some of it. Medical debt swallowed the rest. Collection agencies called 3 times a day. Her credit score was demolished. Her nursing school dreams had evaporated like steam from a coffee pot. Every morning, Emma tied her faded apron around her waist and calculated which bill could wait another week. Rent came first, electricity second, food third. Everything else lived in a permanent state of maybe next month. She lived in a studio apartment so small that her bed touched the kitchen counter. The radiator clanked all winter. The air conditioner died every summer. But it was hers as long as she could keep paying. This waitress had no idea that pouring coffee would lead to $20 million. She had no idea that the quiet old man in the corner booth was watching everything. And she had absolutely no idea that her life was about to detonate. The first encounter, it started on a Tuesday morning 3 years ago. The door chimed at 6:47, and an old man shuffled into Maple Street Diner. Emma looked up from wiping down the counter and felt something shift in her chest. He moved like every step cost him something. His wooden cane tapped against the cracked linoleum floor in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Left foot, cane. Right foot, cane. The sound echoed in the nearly empty diner. His clothes were clean, but worn threadbare by time and washing. A plaid flannel shirt that had faded from red to something closer to pink. Brown corduroy pants held up by suspenders that sagged slightly at the shoulders. His shoes were old leather, polished to a dull shine that spoke of care and habit. Everything about him was neat, precise, and desperately poor. But his eyes caught Emma's attention most. Pale blue, like winter sky through fog. They held stories he'd never tell. Grief that had settled into the creases around them. Loneliness that had become so familiar it looked like acceptance. He chose the corner booth by the window, the one with the torn vinyl seat that nobody else wanted, the one that looked out onto the parking lot and the rain-soaked street beyond. He lowered himself slowly into the seat, his cane propped carefully against the wall. Emma approached with the coffee pot and a menu. "Good morning. What can I get you?" His voice was barely louder than a whisper. "Oatmeal, plain, and toast with butter, please." She wrote it down. "Anything else?" "Coffee." He nodded. That was it. No small talk. No eye contact. No request for extra anything. When the bill came, he counted out exact change from a worn leather coin purse. $5.37. No tip. He ate slowly, methodically, then left as quietly as he'd arrived. The next morning, he came back. Same time, same booth, same order. And the morning after that. By the end of the first week, the other servers had noticed. "Who's the ghost?" asked Maria, a waitress who'd worked there for 15 years. "Just an old man," Emma said. "The $5 ghost," muttered Tony Martinez, the manager, watching from behind the register. Barely worth the booth space. But Emma saw something the others didn't. She saw how his hands trembled when he lifted the spoon. She saw how he folded his napkin into a perfect square when he finished. She saw how he stared out the window like he was waiting for someone who would never come. So she made his coffee a little warmer. She slipped an extra packet of honey onto his tray. She smiled at him like he mattered. Because he did. The pattern deepens. 3 years passed like water through a sieve. Henry Morrison never missed a single day. Not when it snowed so hard the streets became impassable. Not when the flu epidemic closed half the businesses in Portland. Not on Christmas morning or Thanksgiving or the 4th of July. Every morning at 6:47, the door chimed, and there he was. Emma learned his preferences without him ever speaking them. He liked his oatmeal at exactly 140 degrees, hot enough to eat immediately, not so hot it burned his tongue. She started testing it with her finger before she brought it out. She cut his toast diagonally because his trembling hand struggled with squares. She refilled his coffee without being asked, always leaving room for cream even though he never used it. "You're wasting energy on him," Tony said one morning, watching Emma prepare Henry's tray with the same care she'd give a paying customer. "He's not running a tab. He's not tipping. You're not running a charity here." Emma didn't look up. Kindness doesn't need a tip. Tony snorted and walked away. But Emma understood something Tony never would. She understood what it felt like to be invisible. Her father had died in a hospital room surrounded by machines and strangers. The nurses were efficient but distant. The doctor spoke to him like he was already gone. In his final days, what he'd wanted most wasn't medicine or miracles. He'd wanted someone to see him, to treat him like a person instead of a patient. Emma had held his hand and talked to him about everything and nothing. She told him about her day, about the weather, about the terrible coffee in the hospital cafeteria. She'd made him real again, even as he slipped away. That's what she gave Henry every morning, the gift of being seen. What Emma didn't know was that Henry saw her too. He watched everything. The way she slipped her own lunch to a homeless woman who wandered in on a freezing January morning. The way she stayed 2 hours past her shift to help the new cook who couldn't figure out the grill. The way she smiled at customers who were rude to her, absorbing their cruelty without returning it. He watched her counter tips at the end of each shift, her lips moving silently as she calculated whether she had enough for both groceries and the electric bill. He watched her hands shake slightly when Tony yelled at her for giving away free coffee. He watched her tie her apron tighter when her uniform became too loose because she'd started skipping meals to save money. And every single morning, Henry Morrison wrote in a leather journal he kept in his coat pocket. He wrote about the waitress who cut his toast diagonally, the waitress who remembered how he liked his oatmeal, the waitress who smiled at him like he was somebody worth smiling at. He was documenting everything, building case, preparing for the day when he would have to prove that good people still existed in a world that had forgotten how to be kind. That day was coming sooner than either of them knew. October 15th arrived cold and gray, the kind of Portland morning where the rain felt personal. Emma pushed through the diner door at 5:45, 15 minutes early, like always. She flipped on the lights, started the coffee, and began her opening routine. By 6:30, the morning regulars had trickled in. Construction workers ordering eggs and bacon. A nurse finishing her night shift, staring into her coffee like it held answers. A truck driver passing through on his way to Seattle. 6:47 came and went. The corner booth stayed empty. Emma glanced at the clock, then at the door, then back at the clock. Henry had never been late, not once in 3 years, not by a single minute. By 7:15, worry had started gnawing at her stomach. She poured coffee for other customers but kept glancing at the window, expecting to see his slow shuffle through the parking lot. "Your ghost didn't show up today," Maria said, refilling the cream dispensers. "He's not a ghost," Emma snapped, then immediately regretted her tone. He's never missed a day." By noon, the worry had grown teeth. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She'd served Henry 1,000 times and never asked where he lived, never asked if he had family, never asked his last name. She knew how he liked his oatmeal and how he folded his napkin, but she didn't know anything that mattered. A regular named Pete, a retired postal worker who came in every afternoon, noticed her distraction. "You worried about the old man? You noticed him?" Emma asked. Hard not to. Same seat, same time, every day for years. That kind of consistency is rare. Pete stirred sugar into his coffee. Some people are creatures of habit. When the habit breaks, it usually means something broke them. The words settled over Emma like a cold blanket. She thought about Henry's trembling hands, his careful movements, the way he'd seemed more fragile lately, his shuffle slower, his pauses longer. "I should have asked more questions," she whispered. "You gave him what he needed," Pete said. "Sometimes that's enough." But Emma didn't believe it. Guilt wrapped around her chest and squeezed. She'd been kind, yes, but she'd also been distant. Professional. She'd treated him like a customer instead of a person. She knew his breakfast order, but not his story. By closing time, the empty booth felt like an accusation. Emma wiped it down with shaking hands. Her eyes burning with tears she couldn't explain. She barely knew him, but somehow, not seeing him felt like losing something important. The arrival. The next morning, Emma arrived at the diner with a stone in her chest. She went through the motions. Coffee brewing, grill heating, tables wiped down. The whole time, her eyes kept drifting to the corner booth. Still empty. The torn vinyl seat looked lonelier than usual. 6:47 approached. Emma held her breath. The door chimed. But it wasn't Henry. 8 men in expensive suits walked into Maple Street Diner. Their presence was so jarring that conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Coffee cups froze in the air. These men didn't belong here. Their suits probably cost more than Emma made in 3 months. Their shoes gleamed. Their briefcases looked like they could buy the entire building. The diner felt too small suddenly, too shabby. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher. The cracked vinyl booths more pathetic. The smell of bacon grease more oppressive. The man leading the group had silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a leather briefcase that screamed old money and older law firms. His eyes scanned the diner with the efficiency of someone who assessed value instinctively. When his gaze landed on Emma, he walked directly toward her. Every instinct told her to run. "Are you Emma Clark?" His voice was smooth, professional, the kind that delivered both good news and devastating verdicts with equal calm. Her throat felt tight. "Yes. Can I help you?" He extended his hand. "My name is Richard Bennett. I'm a senior partner at Bennett & Associates. May we speak privately?" Emma's mind raced through terrible possibilities. Lawsuit? Debt collector? Immigration? Had she done something wrong? But she'd never hired a lawyer. Never could afford one. "What's this about?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Bennett's expression softened slightly. Something almost human flickered behind his professional mask. "It's about Henry Morrison." The name hit her like cold water. "Henry? Is he okay? Is something wrong?" The pause that followed lasted only seconds but felt like hours. "Miss Clark, I'm very sorry to tell you that Mr. Morrison passed away 3 days ago. He died peacefully in his sleep." The diner tilted. Emma grabbed the counter to steady herself. 3 days ago, October 15th, the day he hadn't shown up. While she'd been wiping down his empty booth, he'd already been gone. Tears came without permission. Hot and sudden and overwhelming. She barely knew him. She didn't even know his last name until 30 seconds ago. But the grief felt real and raw and completely irrational. "I'm so sorry," she managed, wiping her eyes with her apron. "I don't understand why you're here." Bennett opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Mr. Morrison left very specific instructions regarding his estate. "You're named in his will, Miss Clark." The words didn't make sense. They were in English, but they assembled themselves into nonsense. "There must be a mistake. I just served him breakfast. That's all. I didn't even know his last name." "There's no mistake." Bennett's voice was gentle but firm. "Mr. Morrison was very clear about his intentions. He observed you for 3 years, Miss Clark. He documented everything." Observed. The word felt strange. Clinical. Like she'd been studied. Like she'd been a specimen under glass. "I don't understand." Bennett glanced around the diner. The other customers were pretending not to stare, but failing miserably. Maria had stopped mid-pour, coffee dripping forgotten onto the counter. Tony stood frozen by the register, his mouth slightly open. Bennett looked back at Emma. "Miss Clark, you should sit down for this." Emma sat in the booth where Henry used to sit, the torn vinyl pressed against her legs in the same spots where his had rested 1,000 times. Bennett sat across from her, his briefcase open on the table. The other 7 lawyers remained standing, forming a semicircle that made the moment feel both protected and trapped. Bennett pulled out a large manila envelope. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that promised importance. He opened it carefully and removed several documents. Mr. Morrison's estate is substantial, Bennett began. He wanted you to receive these assets immediately, without probate delays. Everything was arranged years ago. He slid the first document across the table. Emma stared at the numbers, but they refused to make sense. Her brain kept rearranging the digits, convinced she was reading them wrong. $150,000 in cash, transferred directly to her. This can't be right, she whispered. It's correct. Bennett's voice held no doubt. The funds are already in escrow. They'll be in your account within 48 hours. Emma's hands trembled. $150,000. She could pay off her father's medical debt completely. Every single collection notice, every threatening letter, every 3 a.m. panic attack about money. She could enroll in nursing school. She could stop working double shifts. She could sleep. The tears came again, but different this time. These weren't grief tears. These were the tears of someone who'd been drowning and suddenly found air. I don't know what to say, she managed. Bennett's expression shifted. Something almost sympathetic crossed his face. Miss Clark, that's just the beginning. There's more. More? How could there be more? He slid another document across the table. This one had a property deed attached. Legal language filled the pages, dense and incomprehensible. But the address at the top was crystal clear. 847 Maple Street, Portland, Oregon. The diner. This diner. Mr. Morrison purchased this property 40 years ago, Bennett explained. He's owned Maple Street Diner this entire time. He hired managers to run it while he remained anonymous. As of this moment, you own the building and the business outright. No mortgage, no liens. The property is valued at approximately $800,000. The room spun. Emma gripped the edge of the table. Behind the counter, she heard Tony Martinez make a choking sound. The man who'd criticized her for being too kind to a $5 customer had just discovered that customer had been his landlord. And now Emma was his boss. I served him breakfast, Emma said, her voice hollow. He paid $5.37 every single day, and he owned the building. He was testing you, Bennett said quietly. He needed to see who you were when you had nothing to gain. Emma looked around the diner with new eyes. The cracked vinyl booths Henry had never replaced. The old grill that barely worked. The flickering fluorescent lights. He'd owned all of it, watched it fall apart, and kept coming back as a customer, measuring her kindness in increments of oatmeal and toast. Bennett wasn't finished. He pulled out a thick portfolio bound in leather. Mr. Morrison was a private investor, he continued. Very successful, very discreet. His stock portfolio is worth $4.2 million. All of it is now yours for $0.2 million. The numbers were so large they became abstract, meaningless. Emma couldn't picture that much money. It existed in a realm beyond her comprehension. There are also 3 apartment buildings, Bennett added, sliding more documents across the table. 2 in Northwest Portland, 1 in Beaver, all fully occupied, all generating steady rental income. Conservative estimate of their combined value is $1.8 million. Emma stopped trying to do the math. Her brain had given up. It had thrown its hands in the air and walked away. Total inheritance minus taxes and fees approaches $5.5 million. $5.5 million. The waitress who couldn't afford to pay her electric bill on time now owned more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why? The word came out broken. Why would he do this? I just served him breakfast. I was nice to him. That's all. That's just being decent. Bennett leaned forward. Ms. Clark, Mr. Morrison was watching you every single day for 3 years. He saw you give your lunch to a homeless woman. He saw you stay late to help the new cook. He saw you smile at customers who treated you terribly. He saw you slip extra honey into his oatmeal when you thought no one was looking. Emma's face flushed. She thought those moments were private, invisible. He documented everything in a journal, Bennett continued. Every act of kindness, every time you chose compassion over convenience. He was evaluating your character, Miss Clark, not when people were watching, when you thought no one was. But I was just doing my job, Emma protested. That's what you're supposed to do. Bennett smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. That's exactly why you, Miss Clark. Most people don't do what they're supposed to do. They do what benefits them. You did what was right because it was right. That's extraordinarily rare. Emma looked down at the documents spread across the table. Her entire life, rewritten in legal language and bank statements. Everything had changed in 15 minutes. The struggling waitress no longer existed. Someone new sat in her place. Someone she didn't recognize. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Mr. Morrison believed you did," Bennett said, "and he was an excellent judge of character." Bennett reached into his briefcase one final time. He pulled out an envelope, yellowed slightly with age. Emma's name was written across the front in shaky handwriting. "He wrote this 2 years ago," Bennett said, handing it to her. "He updated it regularly, but the core message never changed." Emma's hands shook as she opened it. The letter was handwritten on expensive stationery, the kind her father used to admire in store windows. The handwriting matched the signature on all the legal documents. Shaky, but determined. Each letter carefully formed. "Dear Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope my passing was peaceful. I hope I didn't suffer. But mostly, I hope you understand why I did this. 40 years ago, I lost my wife, Eleanor. We bought Maple Street Diner together. It was our dream. We were going to run it side by side, grow old together behind that counter, serve breakfast to the neighborhood until we couldn't stand anymore. She died 3 weeks before we opened. An aneurysm. One moment she was laughing. The next she was gone. I couldn't bear to run the diner without her. So I hired managers and became invisible. I came every morning and sat in the corner booth where we'd planned to share our coffee. I ordered the breakfast she would have made for me, and I waited for something I couldn't name. I needed to find someone who had Eleanor's heart, her kindness, her ability to see people instead of just serving them. For 40 years, I watched hundreds of servers come and go. Some were competent. Some were friendly. None of them were Eleanor. Then you walked in 3 years ago, and I saw it. That same gentle attention, that same instinct to care. You cut my toast diagonally because my hand shook. You remembered how I liked my oatmeal. You smiled at me like I mattered. You reminded me that good people still exist. Everything I'm leaving you, Eleanor would have wanted you to have. Use it wisely. Use it kindly. And know that your small acts of compassion meant more than you'll ever understand. Thank you for making an old man's last years bearable. Henry Morrison. Emma read the letter 3 times. Tears blurred the words, but she didn't wipe them away. She sat in Henry's booth holding his final message, understanding finally what the past 3 years had meant. She hadn't just been serving breakfast. She'd been passing a test she never knew she was taking. And somehow impossibly she passed. 2 days after the lawyers left, Emma was trying to process her new reality. She'd shown up for her shift at the diner because she didn't know what else to do. The routine felt safe, familiar. Pouring coffee and taking orders kept her hands busy while her mind spun in circles around numbers she couldn't comprehend. The morning rush had just ended when the door flew open hard enough to make the bell clatter against the glass. A man in his mid-30s stormed into the diner like he owned it, which technically he thought he should. His suit was charcoal gray and perfectly tailored, the kind that whispered wealth without shouting it. A Rolex caught the fluorescent light as he pointed at Emma. His shoes alone probably cost more than she used to make in a month. His dark hair was styled with product that held it in place despite his agitated movements. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles jumped beneath his skin. "You," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Emma Clark." Every conversation in the diner stopped. Forks froze. Coffee cups paused mid-sip. Emma set down the coffee pot carefully. Her instincts screamed danger. "Can I help you?" "Help me?" His laugh was ugly. "You've already helped yourself plenty, haven't you? I'm Marcus Hale. Henry Morrison was my grandfather." The name hit her like a slap. Henry had a grandson, a family member, someone who should have been sitting at his funeral, someone who should have known he was dying. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Emma began, but Marcus cut her off. "Save it." He moved closer, invading her space deliberately. His cologne was expensive and aggressive. "I know exactly what you did. You manipulated a senile old man. You preyed on his loneliness. You probably poisoned him against his own family." The accusation was so absurd that Emma almost laughed. I served him breakfast. That's all. Breakfast. Marcus's voice dripped with contempt. For 3 years, every single day, getting close to him, making him dependent on you. And now, conveniently, you're in his will for millions of dollars. What a coincidence. Heat flooded Emma's face. Around the diner, she could feel the weight of stares. Customers who'd known her for years, suddenly looking at her differently, wondering, doubting. I didn't even know his last name until 2 days ago, Emma said, her voice shaking. I didn't know he had money. I didn't know he owned this building. I was just kind to him. Kind. Marcus spat the word like poison. You're a nobody waitress looking for a payday. And you found one. My grandfather was old, confused, easily influenced. You saw an opportunity and you took it. Tony Martinez appeared from the back office. For once, he looked uncertain. Maybe we should take this outside. Marcus ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on Emma. I'm his only blood relative. That money belongs to me, and I'm going to contest this will. I'm going to drag you through every court in Oregon. I'm going to expose exactly what you are. I didn't do anything wrong, Emma whispered, but her voice had lost its strength. Then you won't mind a legal battle. Marcus smiled, and it was the cruelest thing Emma had ever seen. My firm specializes in estate litigation. We'll tie this up for years. By the time we're done, legal fees will have eaten through most of that inheritance. And everyone in Portland will know you for what you really are, a con artist in an apron. He turned and walked out, leaving the door swinging behind him. The bell's cheerful chime felt obscene. Emma stood frozen. Around her, the diner buzzed with whispered conversations. She caught fragments. Did you hear that? Maybe he's right. Seems suspicious. Poor old man. For the first time since Bennett had walked into her life, Emma wondered if she should have just said no. Richard Bennett arrived an hour later. He found Emma sitting in Henry's booth, staring at nothing. Marcus Hale was here, she said, without preamble. Bennett's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind his eyes. I expected he would be. He said, I manipulated Henry, that I'm a con artist. He's going to contest the will. Emma looked up at Bennett, desperation creeping into her voice. Can he do that? Can he take it all away? Bennett sat down across from her. He can try. He'll fail, but he can try. How do you know he'll fail? Because Marcus Hale hadn't visited his grandfather in 15 years. Bennett pulled out a file from his briefcase. The last time they saw each other, Marcus asked for $200,000 to cover gambling debts and failed investments. When Mr. Morrison refused, Marcus threatened to have him declared mentally incompetent and seize control of his assets. Emma felt sick. Henry knew about the threats. He knew everything. He documented everything. Bennett opened the file. Mr. Morrison was an attorney himself before he retired. He understood exactly what Marcus was capable of. That's why the will includes a specific clause. He showed Emma the document. There, in legal language, was Henry's final judgment of his grandson. My grandson Marcus Hale chose greed over family. He saw me as a bank account, not a human being. He is explicitly excluded from any inheritance. Should he contest this will, all contested assets will be donated to charity rather than divided. He can't win, Bennett said. Even if he somehow succeeded in overturning the will, he wouldn't get the money. It would go to the Portland Homeless Coalition. Mr. Morrison made sure of that. But Emma barely heard him. The staff is already talking. Some of them think Marcus is right. And the news... The media picked up the story this morning. Bennett confirmed. Local waitress inherits millions from mysterious regular. It's a compelling headline. Emma dropped her head into her hands. This is a nightmare. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Bennett said, his voice gentle. Marcus filed a formal contest this morning. Allegations of undue influence and mental incompetence. He's demanding a full psychological evaluation of Mr. Morrison's mental state at the time the will was written. But Henry's dead. How can they? They'll call witnesses, interview the staff, look for any evidence that Mr. Morrison wasn't in his right mind. Bennett paused. They'll make your life very difficult, Miss Clark. Court appearances, depositions, media scrutiny. This could take years. Years. Emma thought about years of legal battles. Years of being called a con artist. Years of watching people she'd worked with for years doubt her character. Maybe I should just give it back, she whispered. You can't, Bennett said firmly. The will is ironclad. You can refuse the inheritance, but it won't go to Marcus. It will go to charity. Is that what Mr. Morrison would have wanted? Emma thought about Henry's letter, about Eleanor, about 40 years of searching for someone with a kind heart. No, she admitted. Then we fight. Bennett's voice held steel. And fortunately, Mr. Morrison prepared for this fight long before it began. Bennett reached into his briefcase and pulled out another envelope. This one was sealed with red wax, old-fashioned and deliberate. Mr. Morrison left specific instructions, Bennett said. This envelope was only to be opened when Marcus appeared and showed his true nature, which he did right on schedule. Emma broke the wax seal. Inside was a single key attached to a card. The card had an address in Seattle and a box number, a safety deposit box. There was also a handwritten note in Henry's shaky script. When my grandson shows himself, you'll need armor. This is yours. Use it wisely. We need to go to Seattle, Bennett said. Today, 3 hours later, Emma stood in a bank vault in downtown Seattle. The safety deposit box was larger than she'd expected. The bank employee left them alone in a private room. Bennett opened the box. Inside were folders, dozens of them, organized with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime building legal cases. Henry hadn't just documented Emma's kindness. He'd documented Marcus's cruelty. The first folder contained court documents. 5 years ago, Marcus had filed a petition to have Henry declared mentally incompetent. The goal was obvious. Seize control of his assets, put him in a nursing home, drain his accounts. The petition had failed. 3 psychiatrists had evaluated Henry and found him completely lucid. But the attempt was documented in excruciating detail. The second folder held photographs. Marcus leaving Henry's home carrying boxes. Date stamps on the photos proved it was during Henry's brief hospital stay 2 years ago. A list in Henry's handwriting detailed what Marcus had stolen. Eleanor's jewelry, family photo albums, antique furniture, war medals. Items with sentimental value, but decent resale value. The third folder was the worst. Audio recordings. Henry had recorded their last conversation. Emma listened with Bennett, her stomach churning. Marcus's voice came through the speaker, young and angry. You're a worthless old man sitting on millions, doing nothing with it. You're going to die soon anyway. Why not give it to someone who can actually use it? Henry's voice, fragile but steady. Because you'd waste it, Marcus. Just like you wasted everything I've ever given you. Waste it? Marcus's laugh was vicious. At least I'd spend it instead of hoarding it like some pathetic hermit. You've been dead inside since Grandma died. Why are you holding on to money you're too scared to use? I'm not scared, Marcus. I'm careful. There's a difference. You're pathetic. A ghost haunting his own life. And when you finally die, I'm going to contest whatever ridiculous will you've written. I'm your blood. I'm your only family. That money is mine by right. The recording ended. Emma felt tears on her face. Henry had known. He'd heard his own grandson call him pathetic, worthless, already dead. And he'd recorded it, knowing he'd need proof someday. At the bottom of the box was one final note. Emma, I knew Marcus would come for you. I knew he'd try to destroy you to get what he wanted. Don't let him. You earned this inheritance through 3 years of genuine kindness. He lost it through 3 decades of cruelty. This evidence is your armor. Use it. Make him face what he is. He reminded me that good people still exist. Now remind him that actions have consequences. Bennett looked at Emma, and for the first time, something like satisfaction crossed his face. We have everything we need, he said. Marcus Hale just made the biggest mistake of his life. Back in Portland, Emma couldn't sleep. She sat in her tiny apartment surrounded by boxes Bennett had delivered. Henry's personal effects, his journals, his records. A life reduced to cardboard and paper. She opened the first journal with trembling hands. The entries went back 40 years. Henry Morrison hadn't just been wealthy. He'd been strategic, methodical, brilliant. Before retiring, he'd been a prominent estate attorney in Seattle, specializing in wills and trusts. For 4 decades, he'd watched families destroy themselves over money. Children who'd ignored their parents for years suddenly appearing when death approached. Siblings turning into enemies over jewelry and furniture. Marriages collapsing under the weight of unexpected inheritance. He'd seen the worst of human nature, documented in legal briefs and court testimony. The diner had been his escape, his laboratory, a place where he could observe people in their most unguarded moments. How did someone treat a server when they thought no one important was watching? How did they behave when there was nothing to gain from kindness? For 40 years, he'd watched servers come and go. He'd documented their treatment of difficult customers, their patience with the elderly, their honesty when given too much change. Most failed as invisible tests within weeks. Then came the entries about Emma. October 12th, 3 years ago. New waitress started today. Emma Clark. Young, tired kind of eyes. She smiled at me like I was a person, not a ghost. Preliminary observation. Genuine. October 19th. Emma gave her lunch to a homeless woman today. Thought no one saw. She went hungry for her shift. Character note. Selfless. November 3rd. I watched her stay 2 hours past her shift to help the new cook who was struggling. No extra pay. No complaint. Character note. Helpful without expectation of reward. The entries continued. 3 years of daily observations. Henry had tested her repeatedly, and Emma had never known. December 8th, 2 years ago. Left a $100 bill on the floor near my booth. Emma found it. Asked every customer in the diner if they dropped it. When no one claimed it, she turned it in to the manager. Character note. Honest when no one's watching. Emma's hand shook. She remembered that day. She'd been so broke that finding $100 would have solved 3 immediate problems. She'd stared at that bill for a full minute, imagining what she could buy. Then she'd done what her father taught her was right. January 15th, last year. Pretended I didn't have enough money for my meal. Acted confused about the price. Emma paid for it herself without hesitation. When I tried to refuse, she insisted. Paid with money she clearly couldn't spare. Character note. Compassionate even at personal cost. Emma remembered that morning too. Henry had seemed more confused than usual, patting his pockets, looking distressed. She'd slipped a $5 bill to Tony and told him Henry had paid. It was the last $5 in her wallet. She'd walked home instead of taking the bus. It had been a test. They'd all been tests. The final entry was dated a week before Henry died. 3 years of observation complete. Emma Clark is incorruptible. She shows kindness without audience. She helps without expectation of reward. She treats people with dignity regardless of their perceived value. In 40 years of watching humanity, I found what I was looking for. Someone with Eleanor's heart. The inheritance is hers. Let Marcus come. She'll be ready. Emma closed the journal and cried. Not from grief this time. From the weight of being seen. Truly seen. Henry had watched her most private moments of kindness and judged her worthy. The responsibility felt crushing and sacred at the same time. The next morning, Bennett arrived at Emma's apartment with more documents. There's something else Mr. Morrison didn't tell you, he said, settling into her only chair. The $5.5 million was just the beginning. The first test. Emma looked up from Henry's journals. What do you mean first test? Mr. Morrison's true net worth was approximately $20 million. Bennett let that number hang in the air. The initial inheritance was designed to see what you do with sudden wealth. Would you become different? Would you abandon the diner and the people you'd worked with? Would you let money change your character? 20 million. The number was so absurd that Emma almost laughed. But there's a condition, Bennett continued. If you defeat Marcus in court, if you prove yourself against his greed and manipulation, the full inheritance unlocks. 15 properties across Oregon and Washington, silent partnerships in multiple successful businesses, an $8 million charitable foundation that you'll control, directing funds to causes you choose. Emma's mind spun. And if I don't fight? If I settle with Marcus or back down? Everything goes to charity. The Portland Homeless Coalition, the Children's Hospital Foundation, the Veterans Support Network. Good causes, all of them, but not what Mr. Morrison wanted. Bennett leaned forward. He wanted you to have it, Miss Clark, but only if you proved you were willing to fight for what's right, not just what's easy. He's still testing me, Emma whispered, even after he's gone. He wanted to ensure the right person won, Bennett said. Not just someone kind, but someone strong enough to stand against people like Marcus. Someone who wouldn't let bullies take what wasn't theirs. Emma thought about Marcus's cruel smile, his threats, his absolute certainty that a nobody waitress would crumble under legal pressure. What happens if Marcus wins? She asked. He doesn't get a penny. The will is explicit. Even if he somehow overturned your inheritance, every dollar would go to charity rather than to him. Mr. Morrison made sure of that. Bennett smiled grimly. Marcus is fighting a battle he literally cannot win. He just doesn't know it yet. Emma looked at the journals spread across her coffee table. 3 years of documentation. 40 years of watching humanity's worst impulses destroy families. Henry had built something more than a will. He'd built a lesson. A statement about character and consequence. How much does Marcus need this money? Emma asked. Bennett pulled out another file. That's the question I've been investigating. Marcus Hale is drowning in debt. Gambling losses, failed investments, a divorce settlement that gutted him. He's approximately $3 million in the hole. His law practice is failing. He's been taking cases he shouldn't, making promises he can't keep. He needs your inheritance to avoid bankruptcy and probably disbarment. So this isn't about family or justice, Emma said. It's about survival. Desperate survival, Bennett confirmed, which makes him dangerous, but it also makes him predictable. Emma stood in the diner at dawn, watching the sun rise over Portland. The empty booths looked different now. This wasn't just her workplace. It was her responsibility, her inheritance, her chance to honor Henry's memory by being exactly who he believed she was. She called Bennett. I want to hire the best legal team money can buy, not to defend myself, to go after Marcus. There was a pause. Then Bennett's voice came through, warm with approval. Offense, not defense. He called me a con artist. He threatened to destroy my reputation. He's trying to steal an inheritance he has no right to. Emma's voice hardened. I want to expose exactly who he is. I want everyone to know what he did to Henry, the theft, the abuse, the attempt to have him declared incompetent. All of it. That will make the battle public and ugly, Bennett warned. Good. Let it be ugly. Let people see what greed looks like. Emma looked at Henry's corner booth. Henry left me armor. I'm going to use it. Over the next week, Emma transformed. She hired a team of attorneys using the initial inheritance. She began investigating Marcus's business practices, finding a trail of angry clients and questionable dealings. She discovered complaints filed with the Washington State Bar Association. She found records of threats he'd made to other family members over small inheritances. The diner became her headquarters. Maria brought coffee while Emma reviewed documents. Tony, who doubted her at first, became fiercely protective, throwing out reporters who tried to harass her during shifts. The regular customers formed a protective circle, ready to testify to Emma's character if needed. Pete, the retired postal worker, brought her a list of everyone in the neighborhood who'd witnessed Emma's kindness over the years. You're going to need character witnesses, he said. We've got dozens. Emma realized she wasn't fighting alone. The community she'd served for years was serving her back. And somewhere, she imagined Henry watching, nodding approval at the woman she was becoming. Not just kind, but strong. Not just generous, but fierce. The battle with Marcus was coming. But Emma Clark was ready. Subscribe now, because what happened next would rewrite everything anyone thought they knew about justice. The Multnomah County Courthouse stood gray and imposing under Portland's perpetual clouds. Emma climbed the steps with Bennett beside her, feeling the weight of cameras tracking her movement. The media had turned this into a spectacle. Waitress versus wealthy grandson. David versus Goliath. Kindness versus greed. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows. Diner regulars sat behind Emma in a show of solidarity. Marcus sat across the aisle with his legal team. 3 attorneys in suits that cost more than Emma's car. He didn't look at her. His jaw was set. His expression one of absolute certainty that justice would prevail. His justice. Judge Patricia Howard entered and everyone rose. She was in her 60s, gray-haired, with eyes that suggested she'd seen every variation of human behavior and wasn't impressed by any of it. Marcus's lead attorney, a man named Gerald Whitmore, opened with a scorching attack. His voice was smooth, practiced, designed to make reasonable arguments sound like revealed truth. Your Honor, this case is about an elderly man manipulated by someone who saw opportunity in his loneliness. Emma Clark worked extra shifts specifically to serve Henry Morrison. She positioned herself as indispensable to his daily routine. She created emotional dependence, then exploited it for financial gain. He presented time cards. Highlighted in yellow were the days Emma had come in early or stayed late. Miss Clark altered her schedule to ensure she was always present when Mr. Morrison arrived. This wasn't kindness. This was strategy. Emma's attorney, a sharp woman named Diana Ross, no relation to the singer, as she always clarified, stood for cross-examination. Miss Clark, why did you work those extra shifts? Emma's voice was steady despite her racing heart. I was drowning in medical debt. I took every shift I could get. It had nothing to do with Henry. Did you know Mr. Morrison had money? No. He paid exact change for a $5 breakfast. He wore threadbare clothes. I thought he was poor. When did you learn his last name? Emma's voice cracked slightly. The day I learned he died, when Mr. Bennett told me. The emotional truth of that moment hung in the courtroom. You couldn't fake that kind of grief. You couldn't manufacture that kind of shock. Marcus took the stand, looking confident. Whitmore led him through his version of events. A beloved grandfather. A grandson who'd been busy with his career, but always cared. An old man losing his mental faculties, vulnerable to manipulation. Then Diana stood for cross-examination. Mr. Hale, when did you last visit your grandfather? Marcus shifted slightly. It had been a while. I'm very busy with my practice in Seattle. How long is a while? A few years. 15 years, Mr. Hale. You saw your grandfather once in 15 years. Diana's voice was cold. And during that 15-year period, how many times did you contact him requesting money? Marcus's face flushed. I don't recall the exact. 12 times. Diana produced bank records. 12 separate requests for money. The final one for $200,000, which your grandfather refused. 2 weeks later, you filed a petition to have him declared mentally incompetent. Convenient timing. That's not. I was concerned about his welfare. Were you concerned about his welfare, or concerned about accessing his assets? Whitmore objected. The judge overruled. Marcus stumbled through an explanation that convinced no one. Diana approached the judge with a leather journal. Your Honor, this is Henry Morrison's personal diary. 3 years of daily entries documenting his observations of Emma Clark. The judge took the journal, adjusted her glasses, and began reading aloud. March 3rd. Emma noticed I was having trouble with my coat zipper. She helped me without being asked, treated me with dignity, didn't make me feel helpless. The judge looked up. That's one entry. There are over 1,000. She read more. Each entry painted a picture of genuine, consistent kindness. No audience. No expectation of reward. Just a young woman treating an old man like he mattered. Then Diana played the audio recording. Marcus's voice filled the courtroom, cruel and dismissive. You're a worthless old man sitting on millions doing nothing with it. You're going to die soon anyway. Several people in the gallery gasped. Emma watched Marcus's face drain of color. The recording continued, each word more damning than the last. His contempt, his entitlement, his threat to contest the will even before Henry had died. When it ended, the silence was devastating. Diana showed photographs next. Marcus leaving Henry's home with boxes of stolen heirlooms. The timestamps proved he'd taken them while Henry was hospitalized, helpless to stop him. Mr. Morrison documented everything, Diana said, because he knew his grandson would come. He knew Marcus would try to take what wasn't his. He prepared evidence to protect the woman who'd shown him genuine kindness. Character witnesses followed. Pete, the retired postal worker, testified about watching Emma for years. She's the same person when no one's watching as when everyone is. That's rare. Maria described Emma giving away her lunch, paying for customers who were short on money, staying late to help struggling coworkers. Tony Martinez took a stand, looking uncomfortable. I told her she was wasting time on Henry. He barely tipped. She didn't care. She said kindness doesn't need a tip. I thought she was naive. Turns out she was right, and I was the fool. Bennett testified about Henry's meticulous planning. Mr. Morrison observed Ms. Clark for 3 years. He tested her repeatedly. She passed every test without knowing she was being tested. He chose her specifically because of her character, not despite her circumstances. Medical records confirmed Henry had been mentally sharp until his final day. 3 separate psychiatric evaluations from various points in the last 5 years all confirmed complete mental competency. Marcus's claims of senility evaporated under documentation. Judge Howard looked at both sides. Her expression gave nothing away. I've reviewed all the evidence. I've heard all the testimony, and I've read Mr. Morrison's journal cover to cover. She paused. This is one of the clearest cases I've ever seen. Marcus leaned forward, hope flickering across his face. The will is valid and reflects Henry Morrison's clear, competent intentions. Mr. Morrison chose character over blood. That was his right. That is every person's right. Marcus's face crumbled. Furthermore, this lawsuit was filed in bad faith. Mr. Hale knew his grandfather was competent. He knew about his own documented abuse and theft. He filed anyway, hoping to intimidate Ms. Clark into settlement. Judge Howard's voice hardened. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Hale will pay all of Ms. Clark's legal fees. Your Honor, Whitmore started to object. I'm not finished. The judge's tone silenced him. Mr. Hale, you abandoned your grandfather for 15 years. You contacted him only when you needed money. You verbally abused him. You stole from him. You attempted to have him declared incompetent to seize his assets. And when he left his estate to someone who actually cared about him, you called her a con artist. The courtroom was silent except for the clicking of cameras. Ms. Clark showed your grandfather kindness when she had nothing to gain. You showed him cruelty when you had everything to gain. Mr. Morrison saw both of you clearly. So do I. The gavel came down. Marcus stood, his face twisted with rage. This is insane. She's a nobody, a waitress. That money should be mine. The outburst was exactly what Diana had hoped for. Cameras captured everything. Marcus's entitled fury, his contempt for Emma's profession, his absolute inability to understand why character mattered more than blood. Security escorted him out as he shouted about appeals and injustice. The media had their story, not the sympathetic grandson fighting for his inheritance. The entitled bully exposed for what he was. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Emma. Microphones thrust toward her face. Questions shouted over each other. Emma took a breath and spoke quietly, forcing them to silence to hear her. This was never about money. This was about honoring a good man's wishes. Henry Morrison spent 40 years watching people reveal their true selves. He chose to reward kindness. I'm grateful he saw something in me worth rewarding. I hope I can live up to that faith. She walked away with dignity, leaving Marcus's angry shouting echoing behind her. 6 months later, Maple Street Diner reopened its doors. Emma had spent those months carefully renovating. She kept everything Henry loved. The vintage booths reupholstered, but still the same mustard yellow. The long counter with its cracked vinyl stools, repaired but not replaced. The bell above the door that announced every arrival. But she'd modernized too. New kitchen equipment that didn't break down twice a week. Updated electrical that didn't flicker during storms. Air conditioning that actually worked in summer. The biggest change was the name. Henry's Place now hung above the door in elegant letters. Inside, Henry's photograph smiled from a frame by the register. Beneath it, a plaque read, "In memory of Henry Morrison, who reminded us that kindness matters." The corner booth remained exactly as it was. Emma had refused to repair the torn vinyl. A memorial plaque was installed on the wall, reserved for those who need kindness most. Emma enrolled in nursing school part-time. She attended classes 3 days a week, studied in the diner's back office, and worked shifts when she could. The dream her father had encouraged wasn't dead. It had just been waiting. She used the diner as her training ground. The menu now included heart-healthy options: whole grain toast, oatmeal with fresh fruit, salads that didn't come from a bag. She practiced what she learned in her nutrition classes, turning the diner into a place that fed people properly. She created the Eleanor Morrison Scholarship Fund for service industry workers pursuing education. 3 people per year received full tuition, books, and a living stipend. The only requirement: proven character and genuine need. Emma hired 3 new servers, all single mothers, all struggling the way she had struggled. She paid them well above minimum wage, gave them flexible schedules, and covered their health insurance. When one of them cried at receiving her first paycheck, enough to pay rent and buy groceries in the same week, Emma understood completely. The Eleanor and Henry Morrison Foundation opened its doors on the anniversary of Henry's death. Emma had chosen the name carefully: Eleanor, the woman whose heart Henry had searched for; Henry, the man who'd found it again. Together, they'd created something that would outlast them both. The foundation focused on 3 areas: medical debt relief, education scholarships, and elder care. Emma started by anonymously paying off medical debt for 47 Portland families. The number matched her original debt: $47,000 per family. She understood the weight of those bills, the midnight panic attacks, the impossible choice between medicine and food. She lifted that weight from 47 families and asked for nothing in return. The foundation opened a community center in a low-income neighborhood where Emma had grown up. It offered free meals to anyone who needed them. No questions, no judgment, no means testing, just food and dignity. They served 200 people daily. Education scholarships went to students from working-class backgrounds, kids whose parents worked 2 jobs, kids who understood the price of opportunity, kids like Emma had been. Elder care programs ensured that seniors like Henry wouldn't spend their final years invisible and alone. Volunteers visited isolated elderly people. Community centers offered free activities. Transportation services helped them stay connected. When reporters asked about Marcus, Emma's response was always the same: "I hope he finds peace." She refused to gloat, refused to celebrate his bankruptcy or his struggling law practice. Henry had taught her that cruelty returned cruelty, but kindness could break the cycle. Marcus had lost everything trying to take what wasn't his reputation, his practice, his wealth. Emma had gained everything by being exactly who she was. The contrast was lesson enough. Emma still worked the morning shift at Henry's place, not because she needed to. The foundation practically ran itself with the team she'd hired. Nursing school was going well. She had more money than she'd ever spend. She worked because she wanted to, because pouring coffee and taking orders kept her grounded, because she never wanted to forget what it felt like to struggle. One morning, a young woman walked in. She was thin, exhausted, with that particular look of someone barely holding on. Emma recognized it immediately. She'd seen it in the mirror for years. The woman ordered coffee and toast. When the bill came, she counted her change twice, and Emma saw her hand shake. "Are you looking for work?" Emma asked. The woman looked up surprised. "Yes, everywhere, but I don't have experience in restaurants." "Neither did I when I started." "Can you be kind to people who are having a bad day?" "Yes." "Can you show up on time and work hard?" "Yes." "Then you're hired." "And can you start?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really?" Emma smiled. "I'm Emma. Welcome to Henry's place." She saw herself in this young woman, the desperation, the exhaustion, the need for someone to give her a chance. So Emma gave it. The corner booth developed a new purpose. The sign above it read, "Pay what you can." Anyone could sit there and order anything on the menu for whatever they could afford. $1, a dime, nothing at all. Emma served that booth personally every morning, carrying on Henry's ritual of dignified kindness. On the 1-year anniversary of Henry's death, Emma organized a memorial service at the diner. It was packed. Diner regulars, foundation beneficiaries, scholarship recipients, people whose medical debt Emma had erased, though they didn't know she was the one who'd done it. Bennett stood at the front, looking older but somehow lighter. "Henry Morrison left one final gift," he said, "something he recorded shortly before his death. He wanted Emma to see it today. A screen was set up. The video began. Henry sat in his modest apartment, wearing his familiar plaid shirt. But he was smiling, actually smiling. Emma had never seen him smile. "Dear Emma," he began, his voice stronger than she remembered. "If you're watching this, a year has passed. I hope it's been a good year. I hope you've used what I left you to make the world a little kinder. I think you have. I knew you would." He paused, his pale blue eyes looking directly at the camera. "I spent 40 years after Eleanor died, convinced that goodness was extinct, that people were fundamentally selfish, that kindness only existed when someone was watching or when something could be gained. Then you cut my toast diagonally because my hand shook. You remembered how I liked my coffee. You smiled at me like I mattered, and you did it every single day for 3 years without knowing who I was or what I had." His voice grew thick with emotion. "You reminded me that good people still exist, that Eleanor's heart didn't die with her, that kindness is still alive in this world. You gave an old man hope in his final years. That's worth more than any amount of money. Thank you, Emma Clark, for seeing me, for treating me like a human being, for being exactly who you are." The video ended with Henry's gentle smile. Emma stood in the diner Henry had owned, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by his gift and her kindness. The corner booth where he'd sat for 3 years was occupied by a homeless veteran eating a free meal. The scholarship recipients he'd funded were pursuing their dreams. The families whose medical debt had vanished were sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. Henry's test had lasted 3 years. Emma's answer would last a lifetime. She looked at his photograph by the door and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me too." The video continued. Henry leaned forward slightly, his weathered hands clasped together on the table in front of him. "Dear Emma, if you're watching this, you've proven everything I hoped. You fought Marcus. You won. But more importantly, you stayed kind through the battle. That's the real victory." He paused, gathering his thoughts like a man who'd spent years preparing these exact words. "I want to tell you about wealth and character. I spent my career as an estate attorney watching families destroy themselves over money. Good people turned into monsters when inheritance was at stake. Siblings who'd loved each other became enemies over furniture and jewelry. Children who'd ignored their parents for decades suddenly appeared with lawyers and demands." His voice grew softer, more reflective. "I learned that wealth means nothing without character. Actually, worse than nothing. Wealth reveals character. It amplifies what's already there. Give money to a kind person, they become kinder. Give it to a cruel person, they become crueler. Let me tell you about Eleanor." His eyes grew distant, remembering. "I met her when I was 35, already cynical from years of seeing humanity's worst. I'd been betrayed by business partners, cheated by people I trusted, used by friends who saw me as a bank account. I was bitter hard, closed off. Eleanor was a waitress at a diner in Seattle. She served me coffee every morning and treated me like I was somebody worth knowing. Not because I was an attorney or had money, because I was human. Her kindness wasn't strategic. It was just who she was." Henry's voice cracked. "She saved me from becoming the kind of person I spent my career fighting in court. She showed me that goodness existed, not in grand gestures, but in small moments of genuine care. We bought Maple Street Diner together. It was going to be our retirement dream. We'd serve breakfast, watch the neighborhood, grow old behind that counter." He stopped, emotions overwhelming him briefly. "Then she died, and I couldn't bear to be the owner without her. So I became invisible, a customer, a ghost. For 40 years I watched. I tested people. I looked for someone with Eleanor's heart. Hundreds of servers came and went. None of them saw people. They saw customers' tips, obligations. Then you walked in 3 years ago, and I saw it. That same gentle attention, that same instinct to care. You cut my toast because my hand shook. You remembered my coffee. You smiled at me like I mattered. You showed me kindness still exists in its purest form." His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Don't let money change your heart, Emma. Stay who you are. The world needs people like you. I needed people like you. You made an old man's last years meaningful. You restored my faith in humanity. Thank you." Thank you for being exactly who you are. The screen faded to black. Emma stood in the silent diner, tears streaming down her face. Around her, people were crying too. Bennett wiped his eyes. Maria sobbed openly. Even Tony looked suspiciously misty. The money had never been the point. Emma understood that now, with perfect clarity. Henry's real gift wasn't the $20 million. It was restoring her faith in herself, showing her that her kindness had value, proving that her instinct to care, even when it cost her, mattered profoundly. Every act of kindness rippled outward. The extra honey packet she'd slipped into Henry's oatmeal had created scholarships for struggling students. The smile she'd given him on his worst days had funded medical debt relief for desperate families. The toast she'd cut diagonally had built a community center that fed hundreds. Small acts, huge consequences. The diner had become more than a restaurant. It was a symbol of second chances, a place where struggling people could find dignity, where kindness was the currency that mattered most. Emma looked around at the crowd. Former servers she'd helped, scholarship recipients pursuing their dreams, families freed from medical debt, all of them connected by one old man's decision to reward genuine goodness. The door chimed. An elderly woman shuffled in, moving slowly with a walker. Her clothes were clean but worn. She chose a booth near the window and sat carefully, wincing slightly as her joints protested. Emma picked up the coffee pot and approached with a genuine smile. "Good morning. What can I get you?" The woman's voice was barely audible. "Just toast and tea, please." "Is that okay?" "Of course." Emma poured coffee gently. "Take your time. There's no rush." As she walked away to place the order, Emma felt the cycle beginning again. Another person who needed kindness. Another opportunity to see someone instead of just serving them. Another chance to prove Henry right. Henry had taught her that how we treat people when no one's watching defines who we are. That character matters more than blood, more than money, more than anything society says should matter. That kindness given without expectation of reward is the purest form of human goodness. That was a legacy worth more than $20 million. Emma looked at Henry's photograph and smiled. Then she returned to the elderly woman with her toast and tea, cut the way someone with arthritic hands would need it. The lesson continued. The kindness rippled outward. And somewhere, Emma imagined Henry and Eleanor smiling together, knowing their hearts beat on in a waitress who'd learned to see people instead of customers. Would you have done what Emma did? Shown kindness when you had nothing to gain? Stayed compassionate when you were drowning in debt? Treated someone with dignity when everyone else dismissed them as worthless? What small act of kindness will you do today? Because somewhere, someone is watching. Someone is measuring your character. Someone is deciding whether good people still exist. Be the person who proves they do.